فإن كذبوك فقل ربكم ذو رحمة واسعة ولا يرد بأسه عن القوم المجرمين.
Then if they give you the lie, say, your Lord is of unbounded mercy, but his punishment shall not be averted from the guilty folk.
But his punishment shall not be averted from the guilty folk.
If they could still give up their disobedience and return to the true service of God, they would find him ready to embrace them with his mercy. But if they persisted, they should remember that no one could save them from his wrath.
سيقول الذين أشركوا لو شاء الله ما أشركنا ولا آباؤنا ولا حرمنا من شيء كذلك كذب الذين من قبلهم حتى ذاقوا بأسنا قل هل عندكم من علم فتخرجوه لنا إن تتبعون إلا الظن وإن أنتم إلا تخرصون.
Those who associate others with Allah in his divinity will now surely say, had Allah willed, neither we nor our forefathers would have associated others with Allah in his divinity, nor would we have declared anything which Allah did not forbid as forbidden. Even so, those who had lived before them gave the lie to the truth until they tasted our chastisement. Tell them, have you any sure knowledge that you can produce before us? In fact, you are only following idle fancies, merely conjecturing,
which Allah did not forbid as forbidden.
Their apology for their crimes and misdeeds would be that which has always been advanced by criminals and wrongdoers, an apology based on the assumption of absolute determinism. They would plead that when they associated others with God in his divinity, or unwarrantedly regarded certain things as prohibited, they did so because those acts had been willed for them by God. Had he not so willed, they would have not been able to do what they did. Hence, since they were doing everything according to the will of God, everything was proper. If anyone was to blame, it was God and not they. They were under compulsion to do what they did, for the ability to do otherwise lay beyond their power.
قُلْ فَلِلَّهِ الْحُجَّةُ الْبَالِغَةُ فَلَوْ شَاءَ لَهَدَاكُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ.
Then say to them, as against your argument, Allah's is the conclusive argument. Surely, had he willed, he would have guided you all to the truth. Surely, had he willed, he would have guided you all to the truth.
This provides a complete refutation of their apology. In order to appreciate it fully, careful analysis is required. In the first place, they are told that citing God's will to justify one's errors and misdeeds and making it a pretext for refusing to accept true guidance was the practice of the evildoers before them. But they should remember that this had led to their ruin, and they themselves were witnesses to the evil consequences of deviation from the truth. Furthermore, it is being clarified that the plea of the unbelievers that the only reason for their error was that God had not willed that they be guided to the truth is based on fancy and conjecture rather than on sound knowledge. They refer to God's will without understanding the relationship between God's will and man's action. They entertain the misconception that if a man commits theft under the will of God, that does not mean that he will be reckoned a criminal. For the fact is that whichever path a man chooses, be it that of gratitude or ungratitude to God, of guidance or error, obedience or disobedience, God will open that path for him. And thereafter, God will permit and enable him within the framework of his universal scheme, and to the extent that he deems fit, to do whatever he chooses to do, whether it is right or wrong. If their forefathers had been enabled by God's will to associate others with him in his divinity and prohibit clean things, that did not mean that they were not answerable for their misdeeds. On the contrary, everyone will be held responsible for choosing false ways, for having a false intent, and for having striven for false ends. The crucial point is succinctly made at the end in the words, "Then say to them, as against your argument, Allah's is the conclusive argument. Surely, had He willed, He would have guided you all to the truth." The argument which they put forward, viz., if Allah had willed, neither we nor our forefathers could have associated others with Allah in His divinity, does not embody the whole truth. The whole truth is that, had He willed, He would have guided you all to the truth. In other words, they were not prepared to take the straight way of their own choice and volition. As it was not God's intent to create them with inherent right guidance, like the angels, they would be allowed to persist in the error they had chosen for themselves.
قل هلم شهداءكم الذين يشهدون أن الله حرم هذا فإن شهدوا فلا تشهد معهم ولا تتبع أهواء الذين كذبوا بآياتنا والذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة وهم بربهم يعدلون.
Say to them, call your witnesses to testify that Allah forbade such and such. Then, if they do testify, neither testify with them, nor follow the desires of those who have given the lie to our signs, and who do not believe in the hereafter, and set up equals to their Lord. Then, if they do testify, neither testify with them.
A person who is conscious that he should testify only to that which he knows can never testify that the taboos regarding food and other customs prevalent in their society had been enjoined by God. But if some people are brazen enough to feel no compunction in bearing false witness, then at least the believers should not become their partners in lying. The real purpose in asking them to testify honestly whether their customs and practices had in fact been sanctioned by God is to stimulate those with some sense of honesty to reflect on the character of their customs and practices. Perhaps when they realize that there is no evidence of those prohibitions having been prescribed by God, some of them may decide to get rid of them.
قل تعالوا أتل ما حرم ربكم عليكم ألا تشركوا به شيئا وبالوالدين إحسانا ولا تقتلوا أولادكم من إملاق نحن نرزقكم وإياهم ولا تقربوا الفواحش ما ظهر منها وما بطن ولا تقتلوا النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ذلكم وصاكم به لعلكم تعقلون.
Say to them, O Muhammad, peace be upon him,
come, let me recite what your Lord has laid down to you.
1. That you associate nothing with him. 2. And do good to your parents. 3. And do not slay your children out of fear of poverty. We provide you, and will likewise provide them with sustenance. 4. And do not even draw near to things shameful, be they open or secret. 5. And do not slay the soul sanctified by Allah except in just cause. This He has enjoined upon you so that you may understand.
Come, let me recite what your Lord has laid down to you. The restrictions which had shackled their lives were not those imposed by God. The real worthwhile restrictions are those prescribed by God in order to regulate human life. These have always served as the essential basis of all God-given codes.
That you associate nothing with him.
The first principle is that they should associate none with God in His divinity, neither in His essence, nor in His attributes, nor in His powers and authority, nor in the rights He has against His creatures. To associate someone with God in His divinity is to declare that the former shares the essence of God's divinity. Instances of associating others in God's essence are the Christian doctrine of the Trinity, the belief of the pagan Arabs that angels are daughters of God, and the belief of other polytheists in the divine character of their self-styled gods and goddesses, and in some cases of their royalty. Likewise, a person associates others in the attributes of God when he considers someone other than God to be invested with those attributes which belong exclusively to God. One becomes guilty of this kind of polytheism if one believes somebody either to know all the mysteries of the unseen, or to be all-seeing and all-hearing, or to be free of all defects and weaknesses and thus infallible. Again, a person associates others in the authority of God when he recognizes someone to be possessed of authority which belongs to God alone by virtue of his Godhead. For example, the power to either benefit or harm people in a supernatural manner, to fulfill the needs of people and rescue them from distress, to protect and shield them, to hear their prayers, to make or mar their fate. A person is guilty of the same when he recognizes someone as possessing the rightful authority to determine what is lawful and what is unlawful, and to make laws for the regulation of human life. Such authority belongs to God alone, and recognizing anyone other than God as possessing it is tantamount to associating others with God in his authority. Moreover, to associate others with God in his divine rights means that one recognizes someone besides God as legitimately deserving that which may be asked of man by God alone, viz., bowing and prostrating, standing in awe and reverence with folded hands, devotional greeting and kissing the earth, slaughtering animals and making any other offerings in thanksgiving for his grace and benevolence, and in acknowledgement of his overlordship, vowing offerings in his name, calling him to rescue one from one's affliction and misfortune, and all the other forms of worship, adoration, and reverence which are exclusively for God. In the same way, no one has the right to be loved to the exclusion of all other attachments, or to be held in such awe that one always fears his wrath and dreads the violation of his command, both openly and in secret. Likewise, it is God and God alone who has the right to be obeyed unconditionally, and whose guidance should be considered the only criterion of right and wrong. In the same way, man should not commit himself to obey any authority which is either independent of obedience to God or whose command lacks the sanction of God. If someone accords any of these rights to anyone other than God, he is guilty of associating others with God in his divinity. His guilt is the same whether or not he calls such beings divine.
And do good to your parents.
Accordingly, good treatment of one's parents includes showing them respect and reverence, obeying them, trying to keep them pleased, and serving them. The Quran always mentions this right of the parents immediately after mentioning the duty one owes to God alone. This makes it quite clear that the rights of parents have precedence over those of other human beings.
And do not even draw near to things shameful, be they open or secret.
The word fawahish applies to all those acts whose abominable character is self-evident. In the Quran, all extramarital sexual relationships, sodomy, nudity, false accusations of unchastity, and taking as one's wife a woman who had been married to one's father are specifically reckoned as shameful deeds. Fawahish. In Hadith, theft, taking intoxicating drinks, and begging have been characterized as fawahish, as have many other brazenly indecent acts. Man is required to abstain from them both openly and in secret.
And do not slay the soul sanctified by Allah except in just cause.
This means that human life, which has been declared inviolable by God, can only be destroyed for just cause. As for what is meant by just cause, we ought to remember that 3 cases are embodied in the Quran, whereas 2 additional cases have been stated by the Prophet, peace be upon him. The cases mentioned by the Quran are the following. A. That a man is convicted of deliberate homicide and thus the claim of retaliation is established against him. B. That someone resists the establishment of the true faith so that fighting against him might become necessary. C. That someone is guilty of spreading disorder in the domain of Islam and strives to overthrow the Islamic order of the government. The 2 cases mentioned in the Hadith are A. That a person commits illegitimate sexual intercourse even after marriage. B. That a Muslim is guilty of apostasy and rebellion against the Muslim body politic. Except for these 5 reasons, slaying a human being is not permissible, regardless of whether he is a believer, a protected non-Muslim, dhimmi, or an ordinary unbeliever.
ولا تقربوا مال اليتيم إلا بالتي هي أحسن حتى يبلغ أشده وأوفوا الكيل والميزان بالقسط لا نكلف نفسا إلا وسعها وإذا قلتم فاعدلوا ولو كان ذا قربى وبعهد الله أوفوا ذلكم وصاكم به لعلكم تذكرون.
6. And do not even draw near to the property of the orphan in his minority, except in the best manner. 7. And give full measures and wait with justice. We do not burden anyone beyond his capacity. 8. When you speak, be just, even though it concerns a near of kin. 9. And fulfill the covenant of Allah, that is, what He has enjoined upon you, so that you may take heed. And do not even draw near to the property of the orphan in his minority, except in the best manner.
That is, one's handling of the property of orphans should be based on maximum selflessness, sincerity, and well-wishing for the orphans. It should be of a kind which lends itself to no reproach, either from God or man.
And give full measures and wait with justice. We do not burden anyone beyond his capacity.
Even though this is a full-fledged postulate of the law of God, it is mentioned here in order to stress that one who tries to remain fair and just to the utmost of his ability in giving weight and measure and in his dealings with people will be acquitted of responsibility for error. If any mistakes in weight or measure occur out of oversight and thus involuntarily, he will not be punished.
And fulfill the covenant of Allah.
Covenant of Allah signifies in the first place the commitment to God as well as to human beings, to which man binds himself in His name. It also signifies that covenant between man and God, as well as between one human being and another, which automatically takes place the moment a person is born onto God's earth and into human society. The first 2 covenants mentioned are voluntary and deliberate, whereas the last one is natural. The last one is no less binding than the first 2, even though man does not make it of his own volition. For when man enjoys his own existence, makes use of his physical and mental energy, benefits from the means of sustenance and natural resources, in other words, when he benefits from the world created by God and avails himself of the opportunities provided for him by the operation of natural laws, he incurs certain obligations towards God. In the same way, when one derives nourishment and sustenance from the blood of one's mother while in her womb, when one opens one's eyes in a family which is supported by the toil of one's father, when one benefits from the various institutions of human society, one is placed in varying degrees of obligation towards those individuals and institutions. This covenant between man and God and between man and society is inscribed, not on a piece of paper, but on every fiber of man's being. Man has not entered into this covenant consciously and deliberately, yet the whole of his being owes itself to it. Surah Al-Baqarah 227 alludes to this covenant when it says that it is the transgressors who break the covenant of Allah after its firm binding and cut asunder what Allah has commanded to be joined and spread mischief on the earth. It is also mentioned in Surah Al-Araf 7:172 in the following words. And recall when your Lord took the children of Adam, peace be upon him, from their loins, and made them testify as to themselves, saying, Am I not your Lord? To which they answered, Yes, we do bear witness thereto.